welcome to the very first episode of the Girl on Fire podcast. Today, I wanted to kick things off by talking about fire. You've probably heard about fire and the fire movement all over the internet. But what does it mean? And is it even possible, or are we chasing dreams that will never come true? FIRE is an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. There's a lot of hype out there about what FIRE and the FIRE movement is, which is rapidly gaining momentum, especially among millennials. And with that hype, unfortunately, comes a lot of misconception about what it is and what it isn't. At its core, FIRE is about giving yourself options and not being tied to a job because you need the money. It's really as simple as that. They sound like the famous last words, right? I need the money. No one likes to be in a position where their options are limited because they need the money. FIRE is a way out of that. But to really understand FIRE, we need to break it down into its two main components, financial independence and retire early. Financial independence means that you can make your money without having to work. And I say that with air quotes, which you can't see, but having to work in air quotes. You can make money independently of working a traditional job. If you have an employer, then your employer is in control of your salary and how much they'll pay you, often regardless of what you're actually worth or how hard you work. But when you're financially independent, you make your own money. You're not dependent on a paycheck from your boss. How do you do that? Well, your income largely comes from passive sources like investment income. I would say being self-employed is also not true financial independence. As long as you need to work for money, you're not financially independent. Now, I want you to do something for me as you're listening to this podcast. Just take a second and think about what you would do and what your life would be like if you didn't have to work because you needed to pay the bills. You could do whatever you wanted, right? You could quit that soul-sucking job and find a more meaningful one, even if it didn't pay as well. You could spend your time volunteering, traveling, or pursuing all sorts of passions. You kind of get your life back. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, that's where the retire early part of FIRE comes in. Because once you've reached financial independence, you have the option of retiring early. The idea of people retiring in their 50s, 40s, or even in their 30s sounds a bit controversial, especially to older generations. People think you're too lazy to work, so you want to retire as soon as possible. Or that you're not willing to suffer through decades of hard work like everyone else, and you're taking the easy way out. But when it comes to FIRE, the retire early part isn't necessarily about living like a retiree as we know it. It's about being work optional. You don't have to work if you don't want to because you don't need the money. It's as simple as that. It's about having options, giving yourself the option to work or not, or working limited hours or part-time hours instead of full-time. It's about giving yourself the option to leave crappy jobs and choose other ways to spend your time that are more meaningful to you. For example, you might choose to volunteer or work for a non-profit organization, or you might choose a job you really love even though the pay wouldn't be enough to support your lifestyle. So now that you know what FIRE is, I'm guessing you've got all sorts of questions. Is it even possible? How does someone retire early? And more importantly, is it possible for you? That's one of the great things about FIRE. Not everyone wants to achieve FIRE, and honestly, not everyone will. But anyone can try. How? Well, stick around because that's what I'm going to be exploring in this podcast as I try to light my own fire. Let's take a quick break to talk about my amazing sponsors. This episode is brought to you by my patrons. Their support allows me to create really awesome podcasts every week. My patrons get amazing benefits for supporting this show, like branded merch, my investment and FIRE calculator spreadsheet, digital goodies, and a chance to chat with me one-on-one. If you'd like to show your support by becoming a patron, just click the link in the show notes. That's right, I'm one of those crazy millennials who's trying to pursue FIRE. Yes, it's hard. It takes a lot of sacrifice, and that's something we'll talk about in future episodes. But if it's that hard, why do I put myself through it? To put it bluntly, I was born to do more than just pay the bills and die. I hate having a boss who gets to tell me what to do. Having a career in finance means that a lot of my life is already decided for me. What time I go to bed, what time I wake up, where I go, where I eat lunch, when I can eat lunch, what I wear, when I can take a vacation. It's all dictated by my employer. And I don't want to live the next 35 years of my life like that. That's why I'm chasing FIRE. Will I get there? I don't know. but I'm not going to let that stop me from trying. I'll be damned if I'm going to spend the next 35 years chained to a desk making money for someone who does not know and does not care about me and my life. I want to be free to live my life according to my schedule and based on how I want to spend my time. As I've gotten older, I've gotten kind of obsessed with the idea that I'm running out of time, and it terrifies me, especially when I realize how much time I spend working to pay the bills. And there's another reason. I have a chronic heart condition. It's not fatal, or so they tell me, but the symptoms are truly debilitating. Sometimes I can't walk, or move, or speak, or breathe properly. How much longer will I even be able to work? Would I even make it to retirement at 65? I really don't know. And that's all I have for you guys today on the very first episode of the Girl on Fire podcast. On next week's episode, we're going to be discussing investing, why it's so important, especially for women, even if you're not pursuing FIRE. It's going to be super interesting, so you're definitely not going to want to miss it. I'd love it if you would please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. It's a small effort on your part that really helps me out. I don't want you to miss any future episodes, so be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts. If you found this episode interesting or helpful, then please share it with someone who you think would enjoy it too. As always, a massive thank you to my patrons for supporting this show. Their support makes it possible for me to create and share this content and grow this podcast. If you want to support the Girl on Fire podcast, head to Patreon and become a patron. All the links are in the show notes. My patrons get amazing benefits for supporting this show, like branded merch, my investment and FIRE calculator spreadsheet, digital goodies, and a chance to chat with me one-on-one. There are a number of tiers you can join, or you can pledge a custom amount that suits you. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat to you in the next one. Bye!